Obviously, thanks for coming back and watching part 2 of a grown man building a foot drum kit. But you're here now, so let's get on with it. As you saw in part 1, back in 2015 I'd come up with a layout for my foot drum kit that essentially dictated what each foot would be doing, but I still had to come up with a way of turning that into a real contraption. So using the farmer kit as a starting point, I did a deep dive into anything I could find on it in videos and images, trying to figure out how all the mechanisms worked. I like the idea of a platform on top with all of the drum pedals and guitar effects positioned on there, and underneath would be all the drums and all the moving parts. It also occurred to me that if I made that platform higher than on the farmer kit, I could fit more stuff underneath. So not just a snare, but a larger snare, a hi-hat, maybe even a crash and a ride cymbal, maybe even a tom, who knows. I went through a prolific design stage, sketching out every conceivable possibility that I could think of, but there's only so far you can go with paper, pen and cardboard cutouts. So I went shopping. I ended up settling on 5 key components for my foot drum kit. A 22-inch skinny kick, which I had made for me by a drum shop, a 10x5-inch snare drum, which is deeper than the one that comes with the farmer kit, standard 12-inch hi-hats, and a 19-inch crash ride cymbal, which would serve the purposes of both a crash and a ride. I selected these components because they were compact, but they also sounded great together as one kit. You may have seen me playing these components before in my studio build series. Now, unfortunately, I don't have much video footage of the next part of the build process. It didn't occur to me at the time that I might want to make a video about this later. But essentially, my next efforts were to create a crude working prototype of the drum kit. And believe me, it was crude. Probably the most frustrating thing about the prototype was that there were no bearings or lubricants to stop the moving parts from grinding against each other. It was just wood, nuts, bolts, springs, and at one stage, a paintbrush. All that friction between the moving parts made it really hard to play consistently and really hard to stay in time. This is an early video that I made in my living room demonstrating, I guess, an early version of the kit. This version doesn't even have foot pedals yet, so I'm literally just playing on the wooden rods sticking up through the platform. Okay, we've got kick. This was a series of rods and cams. We've got snare 1, a simple rod and lever. Snare 2, I added this second snare pedal so I could do drum fills. We've got a tom that's not working very well yet. I couldn't actually fit a real tom drum into the drum kit, so this is actually just a drumstick hitting the kick drum off center, which sounds a lot like a tom. We've got an open and close hi-hat. There's no complicated mechanisms here, I'm really just resting my heel directly on the hi-hat pull rod. Hi-hat stick. You can see here that the stick angles backwards to strike the hi-hat. Crash, which strikes the edge of the cymbal. And right, which strikes the surface of the cymbal. Here we go. So as you can see, everything basically worked. Over the coming weeks, I made some more adjustments, added the proper foot pedals on top, and just kept working away at it. Here's a video of my friend Jeremy, who also dabbles in foot drumming, trying out my foot drum kit for the very first time. Go.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Oh, it's broke. That's alright. Now, I'm not sure if you noticed anything strange in that video. Did you see the way the drumstick was bending? That's not a mistake, that's a design feature. During testing, I discovered that if you hold the drumstick very lightly or if you hold it very tightly, you get different tones. When you hold it nice and lightly, you get a very sweet tone, that's what we're used to. But when you hold it really tight, you get this dead, dull tone that doesn't sound very good at all. So the problem with my kit was that the way the drumstick is attached on a rigid hinge, that makes it sound terrible. So I came up with a solution. I chopped the drumstick in half and I joined the two halves together with a spring. That way the end of the stick would have some flexibility to it. Now it still didn't sound as good as a human hand, but it was a big improvement. So having proven that the prototype worked, the next stage would have been to build a more refined version with better moving parts, better quality build materials, and better everything. But here's the thing, I never did. See, I realized it had a couple of pretty big deal breakers. The first one is kind of obvious. I mean, it's huge, just look at it. It looks like the size of a drum riser. I think in trying to outdo the Farmer foot drum kit by fitting in more stuff and more features, I'd actually lost a lot of practicality. It barely fit in the back of my car, and then there was no room for other gear anyway. Like, I don't want to use the word regret, but I was beginning to see the appeal of the Farmer foot drum kit at this point. The second deal breaker is that I like to do a lot of live looping at my gigs, and I was hoping to mic up my foot drum kit and run that into my looper as well. But unfortunately, while that is technically possible, practically it doesn't really work. That's because most of the time the audience is hearing the live sound from the drum kit. And when you switch to the loop sound, it sounds completely different. It's no way to get a consistent sound between the live sound and the looped sound. And really you want looping to be seamless. I did think about building an enclosure around the foot drum kit that would completely box it in and keep the live sound from getting out, but then it doesn't even look like a drum kit anymore. It just looks like a guy tapping his feet around on a big box. What's the point? I didn't want to give up, but I didn't know what else to do. So I packed the whole thing away in the garage and had a bit of a think about it for about 3 years. See you in the next video.